Greetings, Raise community. Brent coming in live from Rhode Island with my guest, June Bradham, who is joining us from Saluda, North Carolina. June is the principal of CDM, which stands for Change, Develop, Move. And June was first mentioned by our prior guest, Brian O'Rourke, who runs advancement at Clemson University. And Brian was raving about June so much, we just had to invite her to the show. So welcome, June.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're going to get into how your path with Brian crossed and some of the work that you all did together. And then certainly want to cover what you're up to now. But one of my favorite questions, given the audience here, which tends to be higher education, fundraising professionals, alumni development professionals from around the country and increasingly around the world. I love just knowing about your own higher education journey. So why don't you think about June in June of your senior year of high school? Who was that?
Yeah.
What was she thinking about and what led her to Columbia College?
Well, it was really interesting. My parents, I guess for better or worse, were the really influencers about where I went to school. And for whatever reason, they said I could go to any women's college in the country, but they thought that women's colleges had such a strong leadership component for young women that they thought that would be best for me. And probably because I like to have a really good time, and they probably thought that would, something a little more controlled would be a good idea too. And so I visited several. My grandmother actually was in the first graduating class of Converse, and my great uncles had founded Wofford College. So those independent schools were attractive, but when I visited Columbia College, I just felt like it had the right thing for me at that time. And in my junior year, I was transferred to the University of Georgia and really liked that too, but ended up coming back to Columbia College and finishing.
And it was founded as a women's liberal arts college and actually became co-educational in 2020. So very recent change. Just tell me about the experience, and did it deliver on what your parents hoped you would experience?
It really did. So when I was there, it was all women, but you were cross-pollinated with all of their friends at all the various universities. So you were frequently on a campus of another type. And I felt that I grew as a person. It was small enough and intimate enough, but the professors were longtime steeped people in their field. And so I felt like I got a great deal out of it. And then I later actually went on the board of the college and was vice chair of the board for a period of time and served on the executive committee. And so I saw a different side of the school. And, as with most very small liberal arts schools, and particularly women's colleges, they suffered. They've really struggled. And so, I really admired the work of the faculty and the staff and the president to try to right-size things. And I think they're finding their path.
And so tell me about your post-college career path, and when did the world of philanthropy hit your radar?
Well, this was interesting to me, at least. My mother had been very involved in civic things. So from childhood, I went to board meetings with her and would, sit back with a coloring book and, kind of groan and kick my feet a little bit. But I did see leadership in action with a female leader. So I think, somehow that was just in my DNA. My dad was also civic, but he traveled a lot. And then my first job, I thought I wanted to save the world, right? I was a 60s kid. And so I was a sociology, psychology major. So I thought I could make it through programming and changing the world inside a not-for-profit. And I pretty quickly understood that it's very difficult to change value systems. And so I thought it might be easier. And one of the things they needed most was money. And so I flipped over into a development position. And then I really grew when I hit Hilton Head Hospital. So I was hired as Director of Public Relations and VP of Marketing for the hospital. And fairly shortly after that, they didn't have a development staff. And shortly after that, I was made executive of the foundation. And I just fell right into the honeypot. That was my sweet spot. And so we had a board that was so fantastic. They were retired executives from everywhere in the country. And they were fairly young retirees. And so they knew what to do. They knew the game plan. So I really learned development from them.
Well, I know you've done a lot of thinking about boards and writing and speaking on boards. What was the game plan? What is the game plan? What did they know to do that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have been as, that wouldn't have been as intuitive or come naturally?
Well, they knew how to lead. Number one, they understood their role that was separate from the governing board, the foundation board, and the governing board had very similar types of people, but they all knew how to lead and they understood where their lane was. And so when a vision was presented to them, they would jump on it. And my job really was traffic cop in the beginning, just trying to help them have the most pleasant experience they could and come back with, as much as they could to meet our goals. And the first campaign I ever did, and I had never done one. So I was smart enough, and frankly, they were smart enough to tell me to go get a consultant. And so we brought in a consultant and we did a feasibility study, and then we had them lay out the game plan. And what was great for me was I had the opportunity to interface with the entire community, the entire staff, the board, and therefore I was there for retention too. I was there long enough to stick with those wonderful donors that made whatever project coming down the pike. If it was exciting enough and it was really going to make a difference, you didn't have to convince them. They were leaders. And it's rare. I will say that boards totally like that are rare. I think you do find them more in higher ed and in healthcare.
Talk to me about excitement, because one of the amazing things about philanthropy, and we've talked about this a fair amount, is unlike other markets, if you will, where things just have a price, right? You want to buy a car, this is what it costs. You want a new TV, this is what it costs. You want to be philanthropic? Well, you could do $1 a year, you could do $100 million and everything in between, or even beyond that. And so what role does excitement play? And did you have experiences where maybe somebody was coming to the table thinking, yeah, I could do 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 or $1 million. And then you see them get excited and all of a sudden zeros are added. I mean, and it didn't have to be in that example, but throughout your career, just what does it mean? What can the impact of excitement be? And do you have any examples that come to mind?
Yeah, I do. I would say without excitement, it's just going to be a campaign. It's going to be a kick and drag, slug and take one step against the other. And sometimes loyal people will just do it because they're loyal. But this just happened this last week when I was with a client and the board chair. I had a meeting with the president of the college. We had been working closely with the staff, and the board chair came in. And so we ended up in our conversation. We started out with, this is how we see the campaign rolling, usually the technology sorts of things. And I realized that she that she was going to do it because she was that kind of leader. So I stepped back a little bit and talked about her vision. What did she see? And so I would say that in a general statement, but it happens every time, good leaders and philanthropists, even at whatever level, if you will let them talk a little bit, they will tell you what excites them. And so for her, it was, what is the president's real vision? He's been here a long time. He was, like most college presidents, we're going to see retirements coming up rapidly now. And what is he going to be? And so fortunately, we had a conversation with him and we're able to share just a little bit. And then her tone and her body language totally changed. So our next step was, let's get her together with the president. Let's make sure they're in sync so that she can iterate what that is. So, that's an example of somebody who is also a corporate person. And so I'm pretty sure what she was thinking when she was interviewed for the feasibility study and what she's going to end up doing and getting her corporation to do will be different because of the vision that she's seeing that's more broad and not so just concrete building, right? It's got a lot more to it. They'll get their building, but what will happen to that building, what will happen to the community is what got her juices flowing.
I love it. Help me understand then your transition to founding. I mean, as a fellow entrepreneur in the space, to deciding, I need to hang my own shingle. I believe the year was 1987 when you did that, June. And if you had seen me in 1987, 88, 89, or 90, when I was between 6 and 10, and you said, hey, little Brent, what's your favorite song? I would have said, Walk Like an Egyptian, which was the #1 song in the country in 1987.
You're the age of my children, sure.
So you're hanging the shingle, Walk Like an Egyptian is playing while you're setting up shop. What led you to do that? And tell me about some of those early moments.
Well, what really led me to do that, I had a relationship with a marketing firm that we were using in my previous job. And when I told him that I was going to leave, I was going to Charleston, but that he was fine. His contract was going to be fine. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I'm not going inside another institution. I had a great opportunity. I had a great thing, but I wanted to be more, I needed a little bit more flexibility and freedom. And I thought I had some ideas. And so he said, why don't you start a company within my company? So this is hysterical because I put in $600, he put in $400, and we started the firm. And I bought that partnership out in a year, and for quite a bit more than the $600 initial investment. But what it was really was there was an opportunity. I had paved the way for healthcare fundraising in the state in a way that really wasn't happening. There were only 2 other foundations in the state at that time. And so it was a great, it's like where's the gap, right? Where's the gap? What gap can I fill? Well, what I could fill was sharing with others what I had learned to do. And intuitively, and with this business partner, he was one of the best strategists I've ever met. So he really taught me a lot about strategy and how to listen and how to put the pieces together. So I think learning and doing. And so I would find myself, I was so excited about it. I got 1 client, and then I got 2, and then I got 4, and then I got 6, and it was all word of mouth. But again, I'm not so sure it was me as much as it was, there was a wide open hole for somebody to go through. So 32 years later, and you heard Brian talk about it. I mean, at one point we had 25 consultants working all over the country, and it was a blast. So, just step out there. I mean, it was a real risk.
And there had to be ups and downs. I'm sure the economy changed, during various cycles. Any real high points or real low points that you're comfortable sharing?
Uh, one of the things that was very interesting to me was that, of course, the 87 crisis was kind of the first one. I mean, not 87, like the 80 in the 90s when we had the financial crisis. That was the worst of them. But what's interesting with consulting firms, you generally have clients, they're signed on, and typically they're there for like 18 months or so. And so what happened was our clients who stuck with what they were doing were very successful, even in the financial crisis. But what happened is a lot of people, of course, wouldn't make the decision to go. They were really nervous about that. So we had a real downturn for a while. And so we started doing research. So we did some very high, I had 2 PhDs on my staff at that time. And we started with research where we could bring leaders together and teach them around this research. And so we had the senior leaders of colleges and universities and hospitals. And if they came, then their board chair could come. And so that, while we had to put money into that, we got great returns. And so I haven't done much advertising. It's all been word of mouth over the years. And this last downturn, we just, fortunately, we got ahead of it. And, but I feel it. And I think you just have to work with people to stay the course, because funding will still happen. You've seen this even COVID. We thought COVID was going to take us down, but really we've been busier during COVID than any other time. And a lot because we can handle twice as many clients not having to be on a plane.
I want to talk more about that because I think there are huge implications for our sector. But before I do, when we hosted Brian O'Rourke on our podcast, he was talking about the Mint Ask, and that you brought the science and the art. What is the Mint Ask, and how can that be applied to our colleagues here in the education sector primarily?
Well, this is and Brian says he still uses this, so it's really interesting to me that he who is raising billions is using our little Mint Ask tool that we developed. Essentially, what we did was we did a research project. This is one of the things that we looked at: what drives success, and in this case, in university and hospitals, is what we were looking at. What drives success in a fundraising organization? And from a data-driven standpoint, regression analysis, correlation, and probability were applied to these. The number one predictor of success is the amount of giving by the governing board of the organization. Secondarily, the foundation board. And we know that's an issue with publicly appointed boards, right? But it doesn't have to be. And I have another whole theory on that we can't get into now. So what we did was we said, well, if that is true, why do they do that? Why do these governing boards who are highly successful, why do they give to the extent that they do? And so that's when I started interviewing high value board members from around the country, which led to the book, What Nonprofit Boards Want Out of Their Experience. And so out of what they told us and what we were looking at the time, the name of the company was Corporate Development, MINT, as opposed to Change, Develop, Move. And so everything was branded with Mint. And so we developed this Mint Ask manual, and we actually did it the night before a board retreat when we were on site with clients. And there were 5 of us there to run it. And we developed this process of what are you looking for? What do you need to know? And if you're going to use volunteers or your staff, what do they need to know? And so we did it from more of a qualitative standpoint, and we walked through an outline of what do you need to know first? What's going to be our first step? I mean, it's and then what are we going to do when we get there if it all derails? And we go, so the what if scenarios we played. So we just developed this and we used it with all of our clients and I will tell you why. One client they had this great group of leaders, had a great project. They weren't getting the gifts. They were coming back and the gifts weren't coming, the gift officers. And I said,
So
what?
were they getting no's, or were they just not getting a yes? I mean, what
They
was
were
happening?
not getting a yes. They were not getting no's, but they just kept putting them off. And what I finally realized is they didn't know how to tell the story. They didn't know how to tell the case. So that was the fulcrum of the whole thing. Was we think everybody understands what you're raising money for. They don't. Sometimes the staff doesn't understand it, and they haven't had to practice telling that story. So the real crossroads of the Men Ask is, can you tell your story? And can you tell it in a way that your listener wants to hear it? So we talked about how to evaluate people's personas, what their body language is, what their response is. And so you had to practice it. And so we were the ones to practice. I played the donor, or Brian would play the donor, and we would play the various staff or the various volunteers. And it was hysterically funny, but it was also kind of painful. But at the end of the rainbow, they could walk out the door. They couldn't go ask if they couldn't tell the story. And we just said, don't even go. It's better if you don't go, or take somebody with you who can.
It sounds like role playing is a huge part of what you believe in. I'm curious, based on your perspective, knowing lots of fundraising leaders, is role playing common in our sector? And I would say to our audience, if you're listening and you have a leader or you really believe in or have benefited from role playing, tell me, because I don't think we've talked about that very much. But also, if you don't think there's enough of it, let me know that too. And I'll turn it to you, June. Where are we in role playing, and how might somebody start working it into their training and development?
Well, there are college presidents. Let's just talk about college presidents on that for a minute. There are college presidents who are they're articulate, they're passionate, they're exciting, they have a vision, that vision can come across. And I hope I didn't do a scientific survey on this, but I would guess that that's about 20%. And too many are come across as either a finance person or an academic. And within about 7 minutes, you're rolling your eyes. And so what
does that look like? Because I've not been in the room where somebody is rolling their eyes, bored at the college president. And what is a before and after? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but give me this is what you might get that's overly academic or just overly, I don't know, whatever, not engaging. And then the after that maybe you've seen folks learn or be coached to deliver.
Right. So I would say, we have this wonderful university and we graduate the best students anywhere in the country. And our faculty, they love those students. And what we're finding is, those English majors, they're writing books. They're doing just great. And that new technology center we have, can't get them out of there. They're over there all the time. And it's no. It's just drone on. Instead of, you know what? We've just come off of the most wonderful time working with our faculty across the board. And we have a really exciting opportunity for every student on this campus to have the future they want. And we figured out how to do that. And one of the things that we know is that so many of them have obligations beyond what happens in their work life. And so we're going to have a childcare center right here on our campus. And it's going to go 24 hours so that no matter what their obligations are, we're going to take care of their families so that they can learn. What do you think about that?
I'm ready, June. Where can I send the check?
Right? I mean, who are you talking to?
For everybody, most of you are listening, but we do record these on video. We share them on YouTube. Go back to that part on YouTube and just see how June leaned in, even through Zoom, made direct eye contact, and the body language and the the verbiage are equally important.
Yeah. It's so simple, really. You know, who do you want to have for dinner? I mean, who are you going to ask for dinner at your house and sit around the table for 3 hours because the conversation is so interesting? It's the same thing.
So is this, I have said at times when people, they say, hey, what would you recommend to leaders that are starting a company, or what classes could I take? And I did a group improv in high school, and I did a bunch of, speech stuff and acting and direct. I feel like a lot of this is acting.
It is.
And so if you've got a president that is more academic, that is not the persona you would cast for the role, have you seen people put on that game face that you just put on and learn how to sort of be someone that maybe they naturally aren't?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it can happen. And they may not be an actor, but if you can find the spot where they get excited, you ignite that spot in them. And the way we've done it is, first, I generally, or one of our consultants, works with the leader. And let's just stick with presidents right now, because I think they need this as much as anybody. And so we will talk with them first, listen, and then try to get them open. And what I usually say, to be perfectly honest, do you really need the money? I mean, if you really need the money, I think we can get you there. But we're really going to have you play a number one role here. Are you willing to do that? And so we work on the case in a way, and that's the worst part of all campaigning, is the bloody case for support. I mean, sometimes, to get it excited.
And why do we do it?
Because you have to have a story. You got to get it down to something. You can't just say, if you love us, give us money, right? That's what we do a lot.
What's the best case for support you've ever been around?
Oh, well, actually, I wish I could say it was with a university, but it was actually with a hospital system. And they were building a new cancer center. And I said, we can't just be yet another building. And so we brought every senior leader, meaning physicians, lab people, nurses, patients. We had this roundtable that we met once a morning for like 6 weeks. And I hammered them about the vision. We know what's going in it. Everybody gets it. You're going to have radiation, you're going to have chemotherapy, you're going to have diagnostics, you're going to have wellness. But why are you here? And they came back with, we want to close our doors in 10 years.
Solve the problem.
Pretty clear. That was such an easy campaign, because all of them they made this up. It wasn't me. They did it. We just hammered away at them on the so what question until they finally threw up their hands and were so sick of us they could just, wanted to kick us out of there and say it's just a cancer center. But it was them. So they had the passion. They could tell that story. Any one of them could tell that story afterwards. So it's really a matter of getting down to the so what question. So
June, you have grown up, and your career has been centered in the Low Country, which maybe not everybody knows. What is the Low Country? And then I've got a follow-up question.
Yeah. Okay. So the Low Country is, if you think about Charleston, Hilton Head, Beaufort, that southernmost eastern seaboard of South Carolina. Although our company has worked in 17 states in 3 countries. So we've, but that's home. And I was actually born in Charleston. And so when I came back home, I wanted to come back to the Low Country.
So when you think about the fact that you've been in all those countries doing work, you've been in all regions of the country doing work, what is unique to the Low Country? Like, if I were going to be a fundraiser in the low country, like Brian, who made his move from the Northeast. If I were to do that, or if somebody were to contrast, especially with hospitals that are maybe more regionally oriented, what is unique, if anything, about low country fundraising compared to the rest of the country?
Well, I'm not so sure it's all that different because people are people everywhere and they're wonderful people everywhere. However, what's happened in the low country of South Carolina is probably 1 out of 10 people that you meet today spent their career somewhere else in the world. And we're just finding that many very generous, very successful people, I think, frankly, COVID had a lot to do with it. It was happening before then. But they wanted a quality of life. They wanted a small, beautiful city. It's very European if you haven't been to Charleston. There's a historic part, there are beaches, there are marshes, there are boats, there are tennis tournaments there. We're not much of the Citadel wouldn't like me if I said this. We're not much of a football town, a little bit of a basketball town, but it's really a participant town is what I call it. So if you want to get in the water or go for a walk or do something civic, you can do it. It's not much of a spectator town, I would say. And anymore, and I found old guard South Carolinians much like Europeans in that the idea of a lot of generosity with the exception of a few families, was kind of foreign. You put your money in your homes and your kids and their education and your fox hunting on the on the side. But now what we have is a very different population. And so you have to be a lot more sophisticated and willing to listen. And two, I will tell you, our philanthropists are also making up the type of philosophy that you see with Melinda Gates and Mackenzie Scott, where they're taking on their own thing and driving it. We have, venture capital people who now are in social venture capital, a group of young retirees who are doing that, and they're driving their own train. So the not-for-profits had better be ready. They've got to have a pretty good story.
Tell me about your favorite gift you've ever been a part of that you either raised or that you witnessed. What stands out?
Yeah, this is my favorite story, and it's actually an old story, but to this day, I've never experienced anything quite like this. So a woman was co-chairing a campaign that we were doing, and her husband and her brother-in-law and her son were the owners. It was still a privately held company at that time, of a very significant privately held company. And so I went through with her mid-ask that you asked about. And I said, because she was willing to go ask them for the gift, but she didn't want to do it at home over breakfast. She wanted to formally she said, I want to do it right. I want to make sure we get what we want. So we went through mid-ask. She got down how she wanted to tell the story.
So you're basically coaching the
mother, the wife, and the sister-in-law of these people. I mean, this was hysterical.
To go and ask her
husband. She was going to formally make an appointment with her husband and the son, and the three of them. She made an appointment, so all three of them were waiting on us at their office. And I met with her that morning and picked her up, and I said, you sure you didn't talk with Bobby about this over breakfast? And she said, I am not doing that. I am doing this right. I said, okay. And it was a big ask. It was an ask that was going to make them sit back a little. And she had not prepped them for the amount of the ask. And we walked in, and it was so funny. So the three of them were sitting side by side. They're big men. All three of them sort of scrunched up together on this sofa across from us. And interestingly, our chairs, I'm sure it wasn't planned, were higher than the sofa. So from a body language standpoint, it really gave her the platform of power, even though she was very powerful, but she didn't use her power in anything but a positive way. And so she said, I so appreciate this appointment this morning. This is very important to me. And she launched into the story, and she stopped and she said, do you have any questions? They asked their questions. She answered them. And then she said, and so I would like for you to consider a gift of, and she said the amount.
What was the amount, June? You got to tell us.
It was 10 million, which at that point,
What year?
oh my gosh, this was like 1990.
Okay,
And
so roughly,
and it was only like a, I don't remember, 25 million campaign or something. It wasn't something huge. And they all went like this.
that's basically $21 million in today's dollars.
That's right. And so, and this was a community campaign. This wasn't, some big university. And I mean, their heads jumped, and they didn't say a word.
So basically, mom shows up to the office, and there's really no preparation, and she just goes for it.
She goes for it. But she did what she was supposed to do. She did exactly what she was trained to do, and she did it beautifully. And she also didn't say a word. She held, and that's hard, right? It's hard to let people think about what they're going to do. And so they looked at each other and said, thank you so much for this. We're going to give it serious consideration, and we will get in touch with you this afternoon. And of course, this afternoon, they called her and told her that, of course, they would do the gift. And they said, don't ever do that again. So it was a great story. I mean, it was just a small campaign, but she was a brave leader. And it would be, that same story could be told if it had been a $5 billion campaign. I find it just as easy to raise $1 billion as it is to raise 10 million.
Words to live by right there. Great story. I love it. And I guess when you think about the importance of, the gift officer, I mean, is there something to learn of, when should we be training the influencer to make the ask versus the president or the gift officer being the star of the show?
Yeah. I know that in universities, and I understand totally the reason why, it's easier just to, as we'd say, get it done, right? We've built enough of a relationship. We think we know what they care about, and you can make the ask, and it so often works. But I think an influencer is always better, So is the gift officer having dinner with that donor, or is the influencer having dinner with that donor? And I was just at dinner with they're personal friends, but they're both philanthropists. And during the dinner, there was something in our community that has come up that's going to be a big new thing. And one of them looked at the other one and said, I know you're looking into this. When you decide what you're going to do, let me know. And that happens all the time. We know that happens. And so why not try to involve that without it, so I'm not a big fan of these advisory boards that so many colleges have, unless they're done right. True leaders don't want to be on a board that they have no influence on. There's no decision making. They're eating peas and carrots and listening to a talking head. And so now if it's different, it's a different story. So if you're going to have them, use them. Use them more in a better way.
Time is way too valuable than to sit on a board that really, they don't want you to make decisions, especially given the audience that usually would be targeted.
Well, as a matter of fact, in the book I wrote, So I had done, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Um, uh, with all the conversations we had, the number one predictor of success with their happiness with being on a board was if they had an opportunity on a smaller group to really make a difference. And generally, strategic planning was kind of it. But what they said loud and clear, don't ask me to be on a board that is not going to have any teeth to it or any ability to make a decision. And so, I've found with your audience, it's with the advisory boards, which of course they can't all be governing boards. And so you got to make it feel like they're a governing board. You got to give them real decisions to make. And that's hard. It's hard to, there's a wonderful book called Governance is Leadership that was written by Dick Chait out of Harvard. And what he talks about is the bell curve of involvement. And when you look at your influencers and what kind of relationship you're going to be having with them, look at where their involvement is at the moment. Is it at a high point or a low point? And then you can build it up to a high point for the donor, and figure out how to make that happen. I didn't mean to give you too long an answer there, but
no, it's all good, and appreciate the perspective. You just mentioned the author from Harvard, and I know that you did go, and in fact, as I was working on the business plan for this company, I was finishing my MBA at Harvard, and we were there at the same time, in fact.
yeah.
And so tell me about your decision to, it looks like a couple of times, but more recently, the certificate for called Governing for Nonprofit Excellence.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to take that course, and would you recommend it to others who are thinking about continuing ahead around philanthropy?
I really would, because this was not an easy week. I mean, it was intense, and so it was everything from finance to dynamics, to models. One of the things that I learned there that would be really great for a lot of independent schools, colleges, and universities is how shared governance is beginning to come in, whereas maybe you can't have one president. Maybe you have to have two, because they're two different roles that need to be played. We sort of see that with the provost and the presidents. And so, and to be perfectly honest, for me, it was the networking. I mean, just the people from around the world that were in that we were there together for 2 weeks. And so I got to know people, and I could call and ask them, what did they think about a certain thing that was going on? And because they're the people in the role, not the staff handling them, that's who knows what to do, right? I mean, they know what they want to do because they roll their eyes outside the room. Sometimes they roll their eyes like, I can't believe they really want me to do that. Right. I'm going to sit here and be nice. One of my best friends always said, beware of the smiling CEO. So I learned a lot there about the perfunctory things and how to do critical planning. But it was, frankly, it was just listening to others' experiences, and how they handle things and how they grew things and how they changed and how they quit things too.
Well, thank you for sharing. And it's always interesting to hear the different flavors. There's so many ways to do continuing education, a week-long intensive, master's, other curriculum out there as well. And I don't believe that we've hosted anybody who's attended that as part of the social enterprise initiative at Harvard Business School. So being conscious of time, one of the big themes on the podcast, June, and the reason that you were invited was Brian cited you as one of his mentors. And I've got to ask you, who do you think of when I ask you who are your mentors? You've already mentioned your mother and the coloring book in the back of civic leadership sessions. But who else helped you along your path And then I also want to know some of the folks that you've maybe been able to build a mentoring relationship with as well.
Yeah. I think the mentors for me started, well, certainly having an early partner who encouraged me to start this. There was a woman who co-chaired a campaign with me. She was actually younger. It was my first campaign. And her husband was chairman of the board, and she was chairing the campaign, and we became friends. But I watched her in her leadership. She was young. She became the first woman president of United Way of America without a private plane. Just kind of, and she was from a small town in South Carolina, in the Low Country, as a matter of fact. And so I watched her. She's now the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, grow along the way. And so she was one who served on significant boards, of course. And so she would bring me along. I mean, she introduced me to people. And so, many of the early contracts that we got were because of her endorsement. And I could continue, with people along the way. In terms of those that I mentor, I'm not a fan of formal mentoring programs. I've tried to be a part of those, but I find that we have to find our own mentees. They have to identify themselves, and then I'm happy to talk with anybody. But if they don't want to put, if they really don't want to put in the work and they really don't want to do something with their lives, I ain't got time to stick with them. And so I find that those, and it doesn't mean work. It just means they reach out, they call back. And there's one woman that every time I'm with her and she makes a talk, she swears that she wouldn't, she'd still be flipping burgers at McDonald's or something, which of course is not true, because of the mentorship. But, there was a young woman. I actually kind of took a risk. I knew the president of her company, and I felt like,
who is this?
I shouldn't say it out loud. I will tell you offline. You would know. And but I actually used an article that I'd written as an excuse to meet with the president. And in the conversation, I said, you have a woman who is the face of your company around the country. And I don't think she feels very valued. So I would think about that, because I think you've really got a gem here. And he got a little miffed with me, like, why are you in my business? But what was interesting is 2 days later, he called her in, and she has grown and blossomed. But she's still active in the business world, and I wouldn't want to pretend I'm taking credit for that. But there's so many. Susan Sullivan lived across the street from me and had 3 babies, and she ended up a single mom with those 3 babies. And I brought her into our company and said, listen, this is what we need done. You think you can do that? And she said, I'll figure it out. And I said, I know you will. And now she has, she had a senior level position in development. She has gone on now to do her own consulting firm. I guess Paige Bullington at Blackbaud would probably say that there's some mentorship. She was actually an intern in our office in college. She was the best intern I ever had.
Why? What can every intern listening learn from Paige?
Oh boy, I'll tell you. Well, she got it done. She didn't come in waiting on us to put something on her desk every morning. We had a project. She dug in. She asked questions. She would take assignments off of that and just figure it out. She just went out there and got it and came back. And so, boy, when she was ready to finish her graduate program, there was a client that I had, and they had an opening. And I said, let's put her in here because you won't find anybody any better. And so she got that job, and then she grew to others. And we constantly, we would get together maybe once every 2 months or so, or call and talk. And she ended up becoming my boss at one time.
I don't think I knew that. but for
I
our audience,
love that story. So I
Paige
contracted with
she is the
BlackRock.
president, and Paige is the president and general manager of Blackbaud Healthcare Solutions and Blackbaud Foundation Solutions.
That's
From
right.
intern to June's boss.
Yeah, is just one of my favorite stories. And by the way, she was a great boss, and I tried to be a good employee.
Love to hear that. Love it. Love it. Well, June, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your journey. I mean, to run, CDM for over 35 years now, and to bring the passion and energy that is clearly still a big part of your day to day is it's inspiring. I've been working on this company for about 11 years, and I love meeting people who've been, doing it longer than I have, because it gives me hope that I can stay as passionate and energized as you are today.
Well, congratulations on your success. And I'm so pleased that we've been able to meet in person. I know I've known who you are for a long time, but I didn't know you. So thank you so much for this
No doubt. And
conversation.
I'm really hopeful that I have future low country trips, on the docket as travel resumes a bit here in 2022. And so if you'd be up for it, I'd love to get together when I'm down.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get you some shrimp and grits and crab cakes.
I will have to be I will have to be on a special diet regimen or exercise regimen for that trip for sure. But June, thank you so much, and we'll send your best to Brian. I know he'll
absolutely great guy.
And look, to any of our audience listening as well, if you have recommendations for guests, folks that have made a big impact in your career the way that June has in Brian O'Rourke's, please shoot me an email, brent@evertrue.com, or drop me a note on LinkedIn, because we're always looking for people like June who can help offer a new window, a new perspective into this world of philanthropy. And so with that, June, thank you so much. To the race community here, Brent signing off with June Bradham, principal at CDM, aka Change, Develop, Move. Thank you, June. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.